Because there's an omnipresence of God. Now, I think we all agree that God is present everywhere. We can take a little syllogism. If God is present everywhere, then good is present everywhere, because God is good. So good is present. But sometimes in our thinking, we run astray from that idea of goodness. And because we believe that things can break down and things go wrong, that sometimes they happen. Sometimes they happen just because of the kind of thinking we do. Now, you don't have to go very far in a newspaper or a magazine to know that there are always things breaking down. They broke down in the satellites. We had some very difficult times when sending up satellites. Even some men got killed right on the ground. And it was because we believe in these things. I'm not saying that we should. We should understand that the thing is omnipresent good every place because there's omnipresence of God. So God's spiritual creation is always good. And as I said some time ago, scientists can show you that in a frozen pond, and you might be shivering with the cold, in a frozen pond, if you could collect the heat that's in the pond, you could boil a kettle of water. Now, I know that sounds fantastic, but it's nevertheless true. Because everything is in a relative form. When something is frozen, it isn't as cold as it could be. And when it's less frozen, so on, you have more heat and that sort of thing. So there is an omnipresence of good. And then I have a title here. They that wait upon the Lord, if I see where it is, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. Isn't that wonderful? They shall run and not be weary. When people all the time are saying, oh, I'm so tired, and there's so much to do, I can't get it all done. And they shall walk and not faint. Let's take that first phrase, they that wait upon the Lord, as the first idea in this omnipresent good. People wait upon the Lord by waiting for God to do something. They wait for God to do something. And all through the Bible, it's true that God never does anything direct. So if they're waiting for God to do something out of the ordinary, it's not going to happen. It can only happen because it happens through you. You believe that extraordinary things can happen in your life. Call them miracles if you like, but we know that there are no such things as miracles. Jesus healing of the sick and doing the miraculous, so-called miraculous things he did. Well, he did that because he had that consciousness. And he could use the power of God to perform all these wonderful things. I think it's easy to see. For instance, when he fed the 5,000, there must have been a great presence of good. And he realized it. In the outer, all the people would be starving to death that day. They'd be go home hungry as wolves because there wouldn't be anything to eat. But because Jesus had that idea, that colossal idea, that there is enough and to spare for everybody, well, he produced the food. It was Jesus' consciousness that produced it. Because what you don't have in consciousness, you won't have in the outer. If you want love, you've got to have a lot of love. You want more life, you've got to have a consciousness of life, of divine health, and so on. Some people have it. They come over with it. And they're hardly ever sick. Because in consciousness, they have the idea that health is the predominant thing. Now, they may be very poor otherwise. They may have not much of money, but they have health. You remember the story that Tolstoy told? He had come across spiritual ideas that rankled him because he was a wealthy man. And he kept thinking, what does it all mean? And he went out in the woods one day, and he found a wood chopper. In those days, there were a lot of those around. There's still some in, like, Switzerland and places like that, and I guess Russia, too. I haven't been there. But they don't need oil, and they don't need electricity and that sort of thing. But he went out in the woods, and he saw this big, husky man, and chopping away at the wood and singing. And he saw that he was so absolutely poor otherwise. And he asked the man, how can you be so happy in these surroundings with so little? Do you have bread? He says, no, I don't have any bread at the moment. But I have a spiritual bread that you don't see. And I live on the spiritual bread because it produces everything else. And it changed Tolstoy's life, and he became even a more spiritual man in the end. Because he realized it wasn't in physical wealth that happiness and spirituality came, but it was through the consciousness of the person. Well, we've heard other stories like that where people had the consciousness for the thing and produced it. Well, right here it says, they that wait upon the Lord. It means that you think of God as a waiter coming to give you grand things that you need. But like a waiter in a very fine restaurant, he can't bring you anything until you order it. You have to put in your order, and then he can bring all these delicious things. But if you don't know what you really want, nothing's going to happen. If you don't have it in consciousness, God can't do it through you, because it's always doing it through you, not for you. So those that wait upon the Lord, it means that they understand that, not to keep praying and say, please God, give me this and give me that. Thousands of people over the year have done the same thing. Jesus says, your heavenly Father knoweth what you have need of. But you have to realize in consciousness that it's there, that God is doing it through you. Well, they that wait upon the Lord, they're the ones that get results. They have it in consciousness. You remember Jesus at one time told a story about the man who left some money with his employees, talents, they were called. And to one man he gave 1 talent, another one 2 talents, and so on, as you know. And the first man said to himself, this man is a hard taskmaster. He put the talent in a napkin and buried it in the ground. He said, if I lose this talent, I won't be around here very long. And so he buried it. The other people invested their money. And so when the master came back, those that invested their money had multiplied it. And you know, they got the reward. But the man with the 1 talent in the ground, sure, he didn't lose it. But he didn't do anything else. He didn't do anything else. He says, here's the talent you gave me, the same as you gave it to me in the beginning. And Jesus is trying to say that if you have it in consciousness, and all these different people had varying degrees of consciousness of wealth and so on. And he told the parable so that you would understand that the amount of wealth you have in consciousness you can see and produce in the outer. I remember a man used to come here in this church. He was always talking $100,000. Well, nowadays, $100,000 isn't so much. But 20 years ago or more, $100,000 was a lot of money for almost anyone. And he was so poor himself because he never did anything. He was waiting for God to produce $100,000, but he didn't have it. He didn't have it in consciousness or any other place. And the last time I saw that man, he was getting a handout from the place for the blind over on Lexington Avenue. I don't know what happened to him in the end, but with that kind of consciousness, he could never have produced anything. Well, let's go back again. They that wait upon the Lord, they shall renew their strength. Renew their strength. Because you believe that God working through you, you have all the energy you need. And God is working it out so that you have the energy you need. I just heard that I think that Dr. Peel is celebrating or has celebrated his 80th birthday. And if I listen to him quite often on Sunday evenings when I'm home and with the radio, and he's as vigorous and so on as ever, because he believes in it. He has the strength. He gets the strength. He produces the spiritual idea a little differently than we do. He talks more about Jesus and go to Jesus and that sort of thing. Well, that's all right if that's the thing that you have in consciousness, because it's a spiritual idea. Jesus was the great teacher. And when Jesus said, talking about himself, he wasn't saying he was going to do it. He said, my teaching will do it. That's the whole thing. Well, it doesn't matter. Dr. Peel, understands that's the way he works. And he's very vigorous and renewing his strength and so on. And then there's another phrase here, they shall mount up with wings as eagles. Now, there are not many more eagles in the world. There are a few places down in the Pyrenees. There are some eagles left. I think up in Alaska there's some eagles left. But you see, hunters were hunting them, and for no good reason whatsoever. There's so much destruction goes on for no good reason. Well, destruction is never a good reason. But anyway, they shall mount up with wings as eagles. There are two things here. There's a legend about eagles, many legends, because they're a wonderful bird. But the one legend is that an eagle never fights a storm. In other words, he doesn't fight negativity. He rises above it. Whereas other birds battle a storm and are lost in the Holocaust. But an eagle doesn't. The legend is that he rises above the storm because he has the wings to do it. But there's another idea here. A bird with one wing can't fly. That's quite obvious. Once in a while you see a hurt bird and he's got one wing injured, and he can't fly. He has to hop along the ground and do something else. But a bird has two wings, and they're very important in the story. Because to accomplish anything in life, you have to have the idea, and you have to have the inspiration, the love, the motive power. An idea by itself is a dead thing, if you look at it that way. Unless you do something about it, unless you emotionally impel it. A man might have a wonderful idea, I want to write a book. Well, he might have some ideas to go into the book. But unless he has the emotional strength, the other wing, the book's never going to be produced. A song is the same way. An opera, anything you like. The men that produced operas, and lots of others, of course, they were just on fire with the idea. They saw all the beauty and tremendous things in the opera that they were going to produce, and they produced it. Well, it's true for ourselves. Whatever we want to do in life. You have to generate love, some emotion, and love is the greatest emotion. You have to generate some love about the thing, and then it takes off. And you shall mount up with wings like eagles. And then it says you shall run and not be weary. Again, have you got it in consciousness? The more you have in consciousness, the more you will see it in your life and in the outer. Well, everybody carries with him a book of life. A book of life. Now, I know the Orthodox people talk about a big book will be up in heaven when they die, and your name will be written in it. And they're going to say, Mary, well, you did this, and Joe, you did that, and you did some good things and some other things that weren't so good. And it's all written in the book of life. And there's nothing truer, but it's not up in heaven or someplace else. Your book of life is right within your consciousness. For your subconscious and mind, each one carries with him the book of life. And we're writing in it every minute of the day. It's a very important thing. And it's important not to take into any negative idea when it comes into your experience. Not to say, oh, That's too bad. What can I do about this and what can I do about that? Is to wipe it out the best way you can by seeing the presence of God there. And I saw that this morning in this organ. I was treating for it all the time. I know I'm not an electrician. I couldn't fix the thing. But we got a nice piano here, and we have two fine musicians to operate it and operate the singing and the rest of it. It's seeing the presence of God in the thing. Now, if I see the presence of God in this thing well enough, next Sunday you'll have an organ here. But I can't fix it. I have to find somebody that can do it. We've found it before. I remember, I think it was a good friend here, Clifford Jackson, once brought his little soldering iron. I think he soldered something on the organ and did some things for it so that the organ ran again. And then we had Earl Zahner, and there was so much tape on this little thing here. I spent a half hour, I think, getting it all off, and there's a whole pile of it back here behind the organ. He's an artist, but he has a mechanical bent, too. And he did a wonderful thing with this piece of machinery here, and it lasted for a long time, I think more or less a couple of years. So it was quite a job. Well, we have to do something else about it. But at any rate, when you're taking God into the picture, you're redeeming your book of life. You're expunging some of the negative things. It's the only way to do it. The psychiatrist tries to do it, sometimes with success, sometimes not. Sometimes the psychiatrist puts more negative things into your consciousness. But it's like Jesus with the woman that came running before the angry mob. She had been caught in adultery. And in those days, that meant stoning to death. And she dropped at Jesus' feet, absolutely afraid of the mob. And Jesus wrote in the dust, you remember? It's the only time it's ever recorded as writing. We don't know what he wrote. But whatever he wrote, those that were going to stone her to death dropped the stones where they stood and walked away. And the Bible has an interesting thing to say about that, starting with the eldest. They had lived longer and maybe seen more of these things. And they were the first ones to drop their stones and walk away. And Jesus said, when they all had gone, where are your accusers? And she looked around and she said, there are none. And he said, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Change your consciousness. And you remember how it worked out. She became a wonderful, beautiful woman. But Jesus was always talking about states of consciousness. And here was another case. Well, this is your book of life. You're writing it all the time. Write beautiful things. Write elevated things. Pray a lot. I remember one lady who was still a member of this church. She had some growth on her head. She moved down to Florida. She went to a doctor. He said, well, let's watch it. I don't think it's malignant, but let's watch it and take no chances. He said, to come back in a couple of months. Well, she prayed. And in a couple of months, the thing was gone. But she went back to the doctor. And he said, what happened? He said, I didn't think that would disappear. And she only said, I pray a lot. I pray a lot. In this day and age, with all the counter-currents, we all have to pray a lot. We have to lift our consciousness. We have to begin to understand that in our book of life, right within ourselves, it's only we who can redeem it. So it's up to you. I want to say one more thing. It's almost time. At the present time, they keep talking about shortages. And you know, fear feeds on fear. I remember Franklin D. Roosevelt. He came into power as a president when we had a recession. maybe worse than that. The banks all closed for a few days. But he had a good philosophy. He got up, and one of the most fine things that he said was, there is nothing to fear but fear. So every time you read about shortages, there's not enough oil, there's not enough gasoline, there's not enough electricity, and all these kind of things, don't believe it. Don't believe it. Believe so far as you're concerned, God is working through you and producing. Now, I'd like to throw out another little thing here about electricity. I think that there is a general electricity in the whole universe. We see it in the lightning, the thunderbolt. That's pure electricity, gone to waste, in a sense, and maybe it hasn't. We don't know what it does to the atmosphere. But so long as there's all that electricity up there, and you know this ball is a great spinning dynamo, this earth of ours, and every earth and every sun is a dynamo, an electrical dynamo, and it's producing electricity all the time, used up in various ways and so on. And I think in the not too distant future, some genius will come along and be able to harness that electricity in such a way that every individual car or truck or bus will get its motor power right from nature. I don't know how it's going to be done, but I believe it's possible. I believe it will be done. But for the moment, let us all pray that everything is working out together for everybody's good, and there are no shortages in divine mind.